This is Game On, discussing the biggest games and all the latest sports news with Johnny Montalbano and Hank Indictor on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
How's it going, guys? Welcome back to our 57th episode of Game On. I'm Hank Indictor, and unfortunately, Johnny could not be with us again this week, but joining me for another episode is Paul Lombardi. Paul, how's it going?
Going well, Hank. Been crazy week in the sports world and stuff, but last week we had a great conversation. Looking forward to another good one right now. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Well, before we get right into the meat and potatoes of this, I want to give you guys a friendly neighborhood reminder. Please do not forget to follow us on our social medias. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at GameOnETB, and you can also find us at the Empty the Bench Podcast Network at ETB Network. And of course, please don't forget to hit that big red button down below. Give us a subscribe on our YouTube channel if you want to see more content like this. We've got a lot of good stuff coming for you. And of course, yours truly is back at it again with another blog. And if you want to read said blog, please don't forget to look at our website at etbpodcast.com. And yeah, I would say it's been an epic blog war between me and Jennifer. But in any event, Paul, let's get right into this. We've got some pretty shocking news to start off with in this episode. So the PGA Tour, the DP World Tour, and the LIV Golf League are in a which have been in a bitter legal battle. All of a sudden, they came together, they walked up to each other, and they're like, hey, you know what? Let's just become besties. Why not? Yeah, right. Something about this seems very, very fishy to me because, Paul, you know that, like, my knowledge of golf is, like, minimal at best, no?
Yeah, very true, very true.
And, like, I wouldn't know, like, what a bogey is or the tee is from, like, my ass to a hole in the ground, essentially. But
right.
Yet, when I look at my phone and I get all shocked about this, that tells you that this is, I don't want to sound like I'm exaggerating, but this is earth-shattering news right here.
It absolutely is. And it brings you back to a couple of other major mergers, such as the AFL and the NFL, and also the ABA and the NBA, back when when both of those leagues merged. This is kind of similar to that in a way because they're three actually powerhouse different leagues that kind of rule the entire golf world. And it's not like a side, like one of these is like a side like a USFL or something like that. Like these are all three pretty dominant leagues, and for them to decide to merge the way that they are is incredible because especially with the way that the PGA Tour had talked and, the commissioner and everybody, how they would never want to do business with LIV. They basically banned every player who decided to go play for LIV from doing anything PGA Tour related. Up until this year, they started letting them play the Masters again. But for a couple of years, Dustin Johnson wasn't allowed to come back and play in any tournaments. Phil Mickelson wasn't allowed to play. All the guys who went to go sign with the LIV Golf. But money talks. That's all I gotta say. They have an insane amount of money, the LIV Golf League. I mean, those contracts they were offering, they offered Tiger Woods like $800 million, and he ended up declining it because of his ties to the PGA Tour. But the amount of money that they have is incredible. And realistically, when something like that happens, the PGA Tour is going to be a smart business. The businessmen in the PGA Tour are going to do smart business, and it's smart to merge. And that's exactly what they did. It's all about the money. There are no morals or anything going into this, but it just looks really bad since the PGA Tour had been ripping LIV all the time because it's Saudi Arabian based and the amount of terrible things that go on like in Saudi Arabia and with their people and so on. Rory McIlroy, another one too, who got a huge offer from LIV Golf, declined it because of his morals, wanted to stay with PGA Tour. It's going to be interesting. It's also going to be interesting to see now that all three leagues are merged, what the pay grade is going to be for the guys who were at LIV Golf and for the guys who are at the PGA Tour. Are the PGA Tour guys going to get a big increase in salary since you got a lot of money coming over from LIV? I don't know, but man, this is something that like you don't even have to be a diehard golf fan to truly be surprised and just kind of like shocked about how this happened, especially with the tension that has been going with the three clubs. I mean, DP World Tour not as much, but mainly PGA Tour and LIV over the past couple of years.
Yeah, something like I said, something about this situation just smelled absolutely fishy to me, and I can't believe you took the words right out of my mouth because you said it's all about the money. I know a certain producer who's sitting backstage and watching the show that's probably laughing his you-know-what off right now at that segment. But I do want to ask one question for... yeah, there it is. Paul, you probably know more about this than I do. Do you think Brooks Koepka winning the PGA Championship had a bit of an effect on what went on in all of this? Because I know he's a LIV golfer too, no?
Yep, he's a LIV golfer. Yeah, he was one of the guys who went over, got that huge contract. Definitely could have been. I mean, the fact that I think it was the entire fact that the PGA Tour gave in and lets the LIV golfers play in the Masters this year was really interesting after like literally casting them away as traders for the first couple of years that they were with LIV, completely getting rid of everything that they were mentioned in, all that kind of stuff. And then seeing them play in the Masters makes this announcement a little less shocking because this had probably been in the works for a little while. They're probably trying to ease their tensions a little bit. PGA was like, all right, the LIV guys can come play in the Masters, all that kind of stuff. That it definitely could have had something to do with it. And you have a LIV guy who ended up winning the Masters too, which is definitely not what the PGA Tour wanted to see.
Who was the Masters winner again? Remind me.
It was Brooks Koepka.
Right. I thought he was the PGA. He was just the PGA Tour winner, but he was the Masters guy. That's right. Sorry. Again, like I said, my shows you how much I watch when it comes to golf. But yeah, no, definitely. I think this is all mind blowing. But is there any really other thing you want to bring up on LIV before we get to the NBA?
Not really too much. I do have to correct myself though. Jon Rahm won the Masters. Brooks Koepka won the Open, I believe. I always get the major tournaments mixed up. Jon Rahm ended up winning the Masters. I know that Koepka just won one of the major tournaments. I mean, obviously, I'm not the biggest diehard golf fan there is either. So, I definitely have to correct that. But regardless of the fact of the winners, LIV still allowed all of the PGA Tour allowed all of the LIV guys to play in the Masters and kind of made it interesting. Yeah, Koepka won the 2023 PGA Championship. That was it. The PGA Championship was Koepka. Masters was Rahm. I mean, the PGA Championship, the Open, the U.S. Open, I always get all of them confused.
Yeah, there's a lot of golf tournaments. So many golf tournaments, I can't even keep up if I tried. But in any event, let's move on to the NBA, shall we? So we've started off with the first two games of the NBA Finals. Now, the first game of that series was an absolute boat racing. There was never a doubt that the Denver Nuggets were winning that game. And I'll give you a little fun fact. Nikola Jokic became only the second player in NBA history to have a triple-double in his NBA Finals debut. Paul, do you know who the other one was?
He was only the second, you said?
Yes.
Was it Magic?
Nope.
Kareem?
It's not one that you'd think of right away. I'll tell you that.
Oscar Robertson?
That's a great guess because the Big O I know pretty much averaged a lifetime triple-double, but no.
What era was it?
It was around when we started watching. So I'd say the early 2000s.
Early 2000s. Allen Iverson?
Nope. Do you want me to tell you?
Go right ahead. I already guessed 4.
Jason Kidd.
Jason Kidd. Okay, yeah, they made it back-to-back years. The Nets in 01 and 02, I think it was, right?
No, 0203.
0203. Yep, they made it back-to-back
01
years.
was the Sixers losing to the Lakers with AI.
Yep. There you go.
But yeah, Jokic was absolutely dominant, and then he dropped like 40-something in game 2. But if I'm being honest, that was the better game by far of this. You, me, and Nick were all doing a little live stream as we were watching the game, and this was a lot of fun to watch. And I also enjoyed getting to have some great discussions with you guys about our pyramids and whatnot. But Paul, let me start right off the bat by asking you, what was your biggest takeaway from game 2?
Well, my biggest takeaway from game 2 was the fact that the resilience of Miami, to be completely honest. I mean, Denver kind of pulled away. We were all watching it together. Denver was kind of pulling away for a period of time. Jokic wasn't even on the floor, and they were starting to pull away a little bit. But you saw the grittiness, and you saw the never say die attitude from the Heat that has made them an 8 seed, that has made them all the way to the NBA Finals. Like, this is what they've been doing all playoffs long. We saw this all playoffs, whether it was the Knicks or it doesn't matter who they were playing. I mean, I mentioned the Knicks series because, obviously with us being Knicks fans, it was pretty apparent during that. But and then they got big contributions from their role players, which was a big thing. Max Strus had a good game. Max Strus had a terrible game 1. Couldn't throw the ball in the ocean in game 1. Now he shot, I think, 4 for 10 from 3, something like that, which was good. Gabe Vincent hit some big shots. Kevin Love reinserted him into the starting 5, and he had a pretty decent game. Didn't put up the craziest stats, but had a pretty good impact. Jimmy Butler had a good game too. He was a little bit on and off in game 1, and that's what it was. I mean, when these two teams are playing at their best, they're very, very evenly matched, in my opinion. If they're both playing their best basketball, we didn't see the best basketball from the Heat in game 1. The Nuggets did not play a bad game either. I didn't think that they played a very bad game. They kind of blew it towards the end, and the supporting cast, Michael Porter Jr. didn't have a good game. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, I thought was pretty decent, but Aaron Gordon didn't really do much. But besides that, I mean, Jokic, he had 41 points, 11 rebounds. Like, you can't ask for anything more than that. Jamal Murray hit some big shots down the line that like he's been doing. So, I mean, the Nuggets absolutely destroyed them in game 1, and they were a little bit worse in game 2, but the Heat, their resiliency is what's brought them this far, and could be what wins them the NBA Finals.
I think if there's one thing that I really took away from these first 2 games and the way that the Miami Heat bounced back, unless Denver truly steps up their game, I honestly see no way that this series ends in less than 6 games, if I'm being completely honest with you, because Miami is going to win at least 1, possibly even 2 games once that series shifts to, I think it's called Kaseya Center, but I still think of it as American Airlines Arena, whatever you want, whatever their new corporate name for that arena is. The Heat definitely were resilient. I think you pretty much nailed it on the head. And I also, to piggyback off of what you said, I think Jimmy Butler definitely got hot when it mattered most toward the end of game 2, because he had some big threes right there at the very end. And I'm actually going to agree to disagree with you, by the way, with regards to Denver have not playing all that badly. I think what really came down to it at the end, the Nuggets turned the ball over way too many times, and as a result, the Heat made them pay. And if they turned the ball over maybe even a fraction less than what they did, we're talking about a 2-0 series lead, and we're talking about Miami being in a big hole where I probably would say that they'd win a game or two and like be a little scrappy on the Nuggets. But at the end of the day, I think the Nuggets really had a chance to put a stranglehold on them, but they blew it. And I also want to talk about that lack of a timeout that Michael Malone made at the very end of game 2, because in the words of Jaguar Gator 9, when you have that decision and it completely backfires about you, you can't be completely surprised when it backfires. Talk about a dumb decision.
Yeah. It's the age-old question for coaches. Like, do you call a timeout in that situation, or do you let the time play out? The only problem that I agree with Malone with is that if they called the timeout and set up a play, they could have easily fouled them before the shot went up whenever the inbound came in, and wouldn't have even given them a chance to try to tie the game. So that's something that every coach kind of has in the back of their head. But the timeout is probably still the smartest move. And it was good defense by the Heat too, because they didn't get a great look. They were able to stop them down the stretch, and I do agree with you too. I mean, I think the Nuggets should have won that game. Obviously, that was their game to lose, especially with the way that they started, and turnovers cost them a lot. But yeah, I think I didn't think all in all, I thought they played solidly. I didn't think they played a horrible game. Like Miami played a horrible game in game 1. I didn't think that it was that bad, but these are two tough teams, two very evenly matched teams, and it's not a surprise that it's tied 1-1. And just like I said before this series even started, I'm not surprised if it goes to a game 7.
No, I would not be surprised either. And before we move on to another little NBA segment, I do kind of want to rehash what was our fun discussion for top 5 players in this series. Because I'm sorry, we gotta let's revive this conversation. So you and I pretty much agree that 1 and 2 on that list is pretty much set in stone. It's really 3 through 5 that we're going to have a tough time, because there's no question in my mind Nikola Jokic is the best player. And I still think the Nuggets are going to win this series. And a big reason why is because ultimately, as scrappy as Miami is, I don't think their talent matches up quite to the Denver Nuggets, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But Nikola Jokic is the best player on either side of the court, without a doubt.
Absolutely. Yeah. Jokic is 1, Jimmy Butler's 2, but the question is the 3, 4, and 5. That is the big question. And for the most part, we had similar opinions. At the third, I had Jamal Murray at 3.
So did I.
And then 4, I think I had Bam at 4, and then did I have?
You had Tyler Hero somewhere, if I remember.
Tyler Hero at 5. Yep, I had Tyler Hero at 5. If we're counting Tyler Hero, if we're not counting Tyler Hero, if we're only counting the active players, then I think I put Michael Porter Jr. at 5.
I think I said Porter Jr. and then Bam, but
yeah,
looking back and rethinking my list, I think I have to put Bam ahead of Michael Porter Jr. And the reason being is he's a suitable third option, and I think he fits in. But if you made him like the number 1 guy on any of your teams, I'm sorry, but he's just too Russell Westbrook for my liking, if you know if you know what I'm getting at.
No, I totally agree. I mean, Bam's defense is elite. I mean, he's an all-defensive player. He's made a couple of all-star teams now. Yeah, I think he's a tremendous player. So I think he's definitely got to be ahead of Michael Porter Jr. I mean, you can argue then the next tier would be like Michael Porter and Aaron Gordon. You can debate between those guys, and if you want to throw Tyler Hero into it, you could also Kyle Lowry, I guess, but I think he's further down now towards the end of his career.
Now, since last we left, we have also had a few NBA coaching hires. So I would say maybe now we could switch gears here. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I take that back. Let's talk about your expectations for the rest of the series going forward. You said you had Denver in 7, correct?
Denver in 7. I'm sticking with that right now. I think that those first 2 games made me even more interested in the fact that it could go 7 games.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. I would not be surprised if it went the full 7, but I'm just going to stick with my guns and say Nuggets in 6, just because I don't know if I really want to change anything. But
there you go.
Yeah, it is what it is. We'll see what happens. And honestly, by the time we get this episode out there to the public, we should be tipping off. And who knows how well that prediction will age.
Exactly.
But in any event, let's get into some more coaching hires, shall we? So if I'm not mistaken, I believe Monty Williams was the one that was hired first. That was the Detroit Pistons picking him up. And when I saw the figures of this contract, I was absolutely blown away. What was it? 6 years, like $6 million?
It's even more than that. It was 6 years, I think $12 million a year or so. The specific number, I think was 72. I think it was 6 years for 72. Either 72 or 78. So he's making either 12 or 13 a year. But biggest contract in NBA history for a head coach, obviously. I mean,
6 years, $78.5 million.
78.5, yeah. So it's 13 a year, which is absolutely incredible to think that a head coach is going to be getting paid that. But they wanted to go all in. They got a good young team. They got some talent with Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham and Isaiah Stewart and all the rest of the guys. They have some good young players there. They have the number 5 pick in this upcoming draft in a couple of weeks too. So they're going to be able to add another lottery talent. They're trying to build something. And Monty Williams is a fantastic coach. I thought that it was very ill-minded that the Suns let him go unless there was something, maybe a mutual parting of ways or something that like was behind the scenes that we don't know about. But if it was truly the Suns' decision, I thought it wasn't that great of a decision. I mean, Frank Vogel's a decent hire though, to replace him, but Monty Williams is a tremendous head coach, and from the second he took over the Phoenix Suns job back in 2019, he turned them into a complete laughingstock to an absolute contender, and then got them in the NBA Finals a year later. Like it's crazy how they had the young talent and they couldn't get over the hump. And by the time Monty Williams came, it just elevated everything in the right direction. And then they ended up adding Chris Paul, and they were just phenomenal. And then they were able to obviously win the Western Conference in 2021, but they lost the NBA Finals. But that just goes to show the kind of coach Monty Williams is. And before that, he was a coach for the Hornets for several seasons, did a decent job there. He wasn't a terrible coach in his first 10 years. So I think this is a great move by the Pistons. Money doesn't seem to matter for any NBA franchise. So I think that if they think that he's really the guy to turn this franchise around, get them into some winning ways and build a good young core, maybe add some veterans to it, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, so I when I saw them, if you would, like, let's put the money out of the equation for a minute. If you had told me that the Pistons were hiring Monty Williams, I would just say excellent choice, because pretty much with everything you just said goes to show you he really was a good coach. And yeah, it is really important to remember that the Suns were essentially a laughing stock in the NBA right before he came over. I mean, the sad thing is, I think their play on the court wasn't even the biggest laughing stock. I think it was the previous owner, but I think ultimately the new ownership probably wanted to bring in their own guy, and ultimately that led to Monty Williams becoming a casualty. Not that Vogel's necessarily a horrible choice. I think Vogel's had a solid tenure. I mean, I think he was the closest guy to actually taking down the big three than preventing them from getting to the NBA Finals, like back when the Heat had all their stars. No,
absolutely.
And then he won a title with LeBron, and he had to deal with all that drama in LA. So I don't think he's that bad of a coach, but
yeah,
I don't know. Getting rid of Monty seems pretty strange with regards to the Phoenix Suns. But getting back to the Detroit Pistons, with the young core that they have, I think you definitely need somebody with a winning pedigree who can definitely change the culture, because that's another team that for years had a laughing stock. And fun fact, I believe the Detroit Pistons have the longest active playoff game losing streak in the NBA right now, believe it or not.
They probably do. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they've been in constant rebuild over the past decade plus. It's been a difficult time for them. Every time they start to build a team that they think is somewhat competitive, they only make it so far and kind of crumble down. So I love this move. You know, I like to see. I'm a big fan of seeing the teams who are deep in a rebuild bringing in star coaches like that, and seeing what they can do. Like this is a project for Monty Williams. You know, this is not going to be an easy job. He's getting paid a lot of money, so I don't think he really cares. But it's definitely not going to be an easy job. They got a few good young players, but they still got to develop them. They have to, continue to draft well, and also add some veteran pieces too if they want to compete. They're probably still a couple years away from competing. He's going to have to take his back seat to watch them compete, but to watch them, kind of get everything together. But they also took on two projects too that could have a bunch of upside in James Wiseman and Marvin Bagley the third, who were both top picks. And Wiseman was hurt and barely ever played for the Warriors. And then Bagley barely saw it. So he saw a lot of time for Sacramento, but was not the dominant player that they thought he was going to be right out of college. So those two guys are still young, early 20s, and at one point they were two of the best big men prospects in the entire nation. So they ended up bringing those guys in, and you add that to Cade Cunningham and get him fully healthy for next year. And Jaden Ivey, I think that they have some pieces to work with, and I think that's kind of what Monty Williams sees in them. So it'll be interesting for sure.
Now, I also do want to bring up the contract, because we talked about the prospects of him turning around the team. And I don't doubt that that's a possibility. I do think that's a great hire, but as we mentioned, it's a 6-year, $78.5 million contract. And the other thing we didn't bring up is that there also are incentives for that contract to reach 8 years for $100 million. Yeah. I've never heard of a coach getting a contract like that. And
yeah,
although it's a great move, like I said, take the contract out of it. If we factor in the money and the numbers, that's where the risk comes in. Because if, let's say, God forbid, the Pistons continue their losing ways, then all of a sudden we could be talking about a lot of what's that word again? Oh yeah, severance.
No, it's true. I mean, we never see coaches contracts approaching the 9 figures mark that this one is doing. So it makes it 100% very interesting. And it puts, if anything, it puts extra pressure on them. Puts extra pressure on Monty Williams. Puts extra pressure on the Pistons to start to get things right. It's going to look like a horrible contract, especially if it's a few years into the contract and they end up firing him or something and have to pay off the rest of the contract by letting him go. So of course it's a big risk, but when you're a team like the Pistons, who have barely been competitive over the past 20 years since they won the NBA Finals back in the early 2000s. That was kind of like their star moment, and ever since then they haven't done anything. When you're going on about 20 years of not really doing much, sometimes you take gambles like this and see if it plays out. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But I think Monty Williams could be a good fit.
Yeah, definitely. Well, anyways, let's move on to the Stanley Cup Finals. So it's not really a close series right now. The Golden Knights are leading the Florida Panthers 2-0. And I'm just going to say right now, I think the Panthers have looked absolutely rusty in these first few games. Now, granted, they also have gone a good amount of time without playing, because remember, they did sweep the Carolina Hurricanes, albeit all 4 of those games were very close. But I think the magic in Florida is starting to run out. And Paul, I'm going to be blunt here. I don't really think Florida is going to be able to bounce back from this one, because this Vegas team is a lot better and a lot more well coached than, say, the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Carolina Hurricanes, or at the very least, they're more healthy. They're healthier than the Carolina Hurricanes. I think Carolina probably could have taken them out any other time had they had a full squad. But at the end of the day, give the Panthers credit where credit is due. But I think the Golden Knights are just simply too strong.
I completely agree with that. I think it's almost pretty much the Golden Knights' year for them to finally take it. The Panthers, were a great story. They had a great season this year, and being able to make the run that they did, but being down 2-0, there's a very deflating feeling that this series is over. And obviously it's never over. You guys see what happens, but after losing 7-2 yesterday, it's not great. It's not great by any means. So I think Vegas. I do think Vegas is going to hold on to this, and hopefully Florida makes it at least somewhat of a series, and starts to come back a little bit. But they did not look good last night. They got destroyed in about every facet of the game. So it's the Golden Knights Stanley Cup to lose at this point.
Yeah, and there really isn't any particular player that's performance stands out. That's how great the Knights have been. I think Mark So, you could argue, is a Conn Smythe winner. I think you could also argue Aiden Hill, who he came in the middle of, I want to say it was the second round, and he's absolutely taken that goalie job and ran with it throughout the rest of the playoffs. He has been an absolute stonewall. And Jack Eichel hasn't even been their best player. That's how damn loaded they are. Chandler Stevenson's another good one. Even if I could maybe see Florida stealing a game at home, and fun fact, they've never won a Stanley Cup Finals game, so this will automatically be their most successful season in franchise history. But despite the heroics of so many guys such as Playoff Bob and Matthew Tkachuk, I think this is where the Cinderella runs clock strikes midnight. But in any event, let's go on to Major League Baseball, and you and I both have a lot to discuss with regards to our team. So why don't we start off with your New York Metropolitans? So it's been an up and down week for the Mets, to say the least. They swept the Philadelphia Phillies, and then you go into the series against the Toronto Blue Jays. You have a lot of confidence going for them. Then all of a sudden they get swept in that one. And Paul, I was at the first 2 games of that series. You and I actually met up during the Friday night game. And look, the big reason as to why they lost the series, the offense was, with the exception of those 4 solo home runs they hit on Sunday, non-existent.
Absolutely. I mean, when it comes to the Phillies series, they looked like the team that you were expecting them to be this season. They were firing on all cylinders. They looked great. Their pitching was coming through. Their hitting was coming through. The Blue Jays series, bottom line is they couldn't hit with runners in scoring position. I mean, that's the biggest issue. They were 0 for 11, I think, on Sunday with runners in scoring position. Game that we were both at on Friday, the amount of infield pop-ups that they were hitting with guys on second and third, one out, it was terrible. I mean, Chris Bassett had them completely fooled the entire game. But this is what the Mets have been this season. I mean, this is the definition of the Mets. They are a good team, like just flat good. They're not bad and they're not great. They're just good. They're right smack down the middle. And it's going to take some type of spark to get them to get closer to the grade level that they want to be at, whether that's Verlander. Verlander looked great on Friday night. I mean, he gave up the leadoff home run to George Springer, but besides that, didn't give up anything. Scherzer's looked great his last few starts. So we need those two to lock in and stay healthy. That's a big thing. Quintana coming back too soon is going to, I think, help out the rotation a lot. Having to rely on Tyler McGill and David Peterson and all those guys to get you some starts definitely hurts. And Kodai Senga too is in learning his way into the MLB. He's had some amazing starts. He's had a couple of starts where he's just hasn't really done much, but he's a typical rookie. He's a typical older Japanese rookie that's trying to get the vibes of the MLB. And then the offense too. I think the offense is built to. I don't think that they necessarily need to add a bat. A lot of some people are saying they need to add like an extra bat, all that kind of stuff. I think their offense is good enough. I think the main thing is they need to add maybe another starter and some more arms in the bullpen too, because they've had to rely on Jeff Brigham, John Curtis, Jimmy Yacobonis like all season long, and Dominic Leone, and those are all journeyman guys that you aren't going to be able to fill out an entire season with. So yeah, the Edwin Diaz injury, it played a huge factor. I mean, I don't know where we would be without David Robertson. Dude's been amazing. We'd probably be a good 3 games worse than we are right now if we didn't have David Robertson. So I think that's the key, but there's definitely got to be a spark that's made. Lindor has not been hitting. Pete Alonso went on that huge tear, hitting a bunch of home runs, but his average is down. Nimmo's had a great year. McNeil's had an okay year. He's been up and down, somewhat cold. Brett Beatty, it's been a little bit cold. Obviously as the rookies, you give them a little leeway as they're trying to learn their way back. But Francisco Alvarez went on that tear and is a little bit cold right now. So they really just need a spark, I think, and that can come in a variety of ways. It can come by their young guys stepping up, like what had been happening the last few weeks, or it could come from a trade. Trading for a starter, going out there and being aggressive, possibly getting Shane Bieber or something like that. It's going to take a lot to get Shane Bieber, but doing something like that, I think, is what's going to get them kick-started. They do not look like a division champion team. They look like a wild card team for sure. And I mean, that's my nice little rant, my nice take on the first 60 games of the season, but it's been a bit of a roller coaster. And with the way the team is playing right now, they're not going to do much. They need a little bit of a spark, and then they need some of these guys to start hitting too.
Yeah, I feel like the story for the Mets has been 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and that pretty much can happen when you're at 500 the first 60 games of the season. I mean, the silver lining is you can have a kind of iffy season and still make it to the playoffs as a wild card, and you have the big names in your rotation, such as a Justin Verlander or a Max Scherzer. But I said this in my Memorial Day Checkpoint blog. I feel like everything needs to go right for the Mets if they are going to go anywhere at all this year, even if it's a cameo appearance in the wild card round, if you know what I mean. But yeah, no, maybe things can change. I mean, like I said, that crazier things have happened. I mean, we saw where the Phillies were at this point last season. They were well under 500. They fired Joe Girardi. Look what happened there. I don't think they're going to make the same turnaround this year. And they're only 5.5 games out of first place against the Braves. So that's interesting. And they got a pretty big series coming up against the Atlanta Braves this week. But we'll see what happens there. And, hopefully you can find a way to, hold your own in that series against the Atlanta Braves, but definitely have their work cut out for them the rest of the way. And as far as their approach at bat, it wasn't even just so much they're hitting with runners in scoring position that was nuts. I noticed they kept swinging at the first pitch and they just weren't being patient with a lot of pitchers. Has that been common this year for the Mets?
Absolutely. I think a lot of their hitting has been a little bit undisciplined. They had much better of an approach last season, hitting wise, and they've been a little bit undisciplined, chasing after bad pitches, swinging on 3-0s and grounding out. All that kind of stuff has been some stuff that's cost them, honestly. And it's little things like that you can fix, that they can definitely get turned around, but they gotta figure something out. Everybody's gotta get on board. They need more out of Lindor. They need more out of Marte. There's a lot of guys that they need more out of to be the wild card team that they're going to try to be. It's going to be very difficult to win the division if they are red hot and they completely turn the season around. Then maybe you get some hope for that. But as it stands right now, it doesn't seem like that. But at least let's get a wild card.
Yeah, that I think pretty much sums up the Mets in a nutshell. Now, let's get to the Yankees, who took 2 out of 3 over the weekend from the LA Dodgers. Aaron Judge continued his torrid hitting. He's now I believe he is now 2 behind Alonso in the home run race. However, we did receive a bit of a setback in that department in the sense that Aaron Judge, while making an insane catch against the Dodgers, crashed into the wall and he ended up hurting his toe. He didn't play in the win on Sunday when Anthony Volpe hit a 2-run home run, and he's not in the lineup. He's not in the lineup as we're recording this episode, and who knows if he will be back by the time this episode gets released. But here's a question that might age as well as sour milk once we get this out there. Is it possible that Aaron Judge is going to go to the IL?
I mean, it definitely seems like it. It seems like that might be the case. I mean, I heard the interview with Aaron Boone today. They asked him if he's going to go to the IL, and he claims that they're not sure yet. They're giving it a couple of days to see if it's actually going to be worth that. They know Nestor Cortez is going to be on the IL. That's
well, yeah, that's a pretty big blow to our pitching rotation, by the way. I haven't even gotten to that yet. Yes.
But again, like you say a lot, Hank, and I'm sure you'll love to rant about it. When they don't have Judge in the lineup, it's not a great team. It's not a great offensive team, and that's the dangerous part about him getting hurt.
Yeah, you pretty much gave me a good segue into what this rant is going to be. And this is why I've had a hard time getting my hopes up. I mean, look, I always will have that hope in the back of my mind every time the Yankees have a chance that, maybe this could be the year of 28, even though I don't think that's very likely considering the competition we have in the American League. But I'm going to get to that in a little bit. This team is essentially the same as they were last year. And you could probably argue that they're marginally better, if only because of the production of certain guys like Oswaldo Cabrera and Anthony Volpe. And I know Volpe's had his ups and downs, but I mean, come on. The kid's 21 years old. Like, he was bound to get into a slump. That was inevitable. And for those who want him sent to the minors at this point, let me ask you the real question. What were you doing at age 21 that was so much better than Anthony Volpe? But back to the Yankees right now. I mean, I understand they tried to make things better, at least with their rotation. I mean, they did sign Carlos Rodon to that big contract, but unfortunately, we just have not gotten to see him pitch yet this year, and leaves me concerned that maybe he could very well end up being Carl Pavano 2.0, minus the tractor trailer accident. But then you also have this continued approach in the lineup where it's the three true outcomes, strikeout, walk, or home run, nothing in between. It's just so grating. And this is why I've been saying for the past, probably since 2019, that the Yankees are the definition of insanity. They do the same thing over and over again, and they expect different results. And if you look past Aaron Judge in this lineup, I'm sorry, but this is not a team that's as good as many people think they are. He is somebody that is absolutely carrying this lineup. And if they lose him for a fraction of time, oh boy, I shudder to think about the run production that they are probably going to be getting within the next few weeks. I mean, don't get me wrong. Anthony Rizzo is all right. I mean, he's probably the only other guy that you can actually get a consistent 300 average from in this lineup. And he's the only other guy that you can probably count on to hit a clutch home run every now and then. But then you look at Giancarlo Stanton, Mr. Money for Nothing and your chicks for free, Mr. Glass Bones and Paper Skin and whatnot. And then you look at Josh Donaldson, who occasionally will look like Greg Nettles with the way he plays third base, but he's another guy who's like pretty much washed up at this point. I have every right to be worried about the Yankees going forward. And I'm going to go beyond just like the current team too. Look at the rest of your division. The Yankees, as I'm talking, are only 2 games behind the Baltimore Orioles for second place in the division. And the Orioles have a really good record. And I've said all year long that the Orioles were going to be a threat. That's looking right so far. There's no chance in hell they're catching the Tampa Bay Rays for first place. That's pretty much a given at this point. I think if the Yankees we better hope if the Yankees even do go anywhere this year, and if this injury isn't as serious, that we face a mid-AL Central team in the playoffs like usual, because that's the only reason the Yankees even win a playoff series anyways. But, yeah, no, it's just, I don't know. I can't really get too hyped up, even though I kind of just did, but the only reason I'm getting hyped up is because, like I said, it literally feels like I'm watching the same movie every single year, but just with a slightly different cast of characters every now and then.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And from the outside looking in as a Mets fan, watching the Yankees, it's got to be frustrating because, they got too many veterans who are well past their primes as well with Donaldson. And I mean, Rizzo's had a decent season, so we can't even group him into that. But the offensive production has just been tough without Judge. I mean, Judge carried the entire offense last season, and he's doing just about the same this year. So there's something got to change. Will it happen this season? It might be difficult to happen this season, but upcoming off seasons, and I mean, obviously, you have high hopes for Anthony Volpe. Jason Dominguez is supposed to come up eventually, so you got high hopes for those guys, and making some signs. But both the Mets and the Yankees, with the way that their teams are constructed right now, there's too many guys. There's too many teams in both the National League and the American League that are just a lot better, and it's plain simple.
Now, speaking of one of those really good teams, I was actually planning on having a discussion about them, and we will get to how good they are, but this team unfortunately has to be mentioned because one of their stars just landed on the IL and he got knocked out for the season. And Paul, I don't mean to sound like a dick for saying this, because at the end of the day, I think you probably dodged a bullet by not giving Jacob deGrom the money that the Texas Rangers ended up giving. But that's a pretty big blow to lose a pitcher of the star caliber of Jacob deGrom for the season with Tommy John surgery, because look at all the money that they gave him. I mean, this is a team that pretty much was also trying to change their culture. And all things considered, they pretty much have changed their culture. But if he's out for the season, I think their playoff hopes definitely take a hit a little bit, because this is a guy who's been there, done that. He's pitched in some big games for the New York Mets, and his experience, I think, could have really helped them going forward.
No, absolutely. Like, they've been on a tear without him, and if they were going to end up winning the AL West and you get him back later in the season, it would help a ton. There's no doubt about that. I mean, the real reason why they've been dominant so far is their hitting has been incredible. I mean, their entire lineup up and down is bang well over 300. They're just insane. Nathan Eovaldi is a Cy Young candidate out of nowhere this year. Those are all the reasons why they've been as dominant as they are. But the deGrom injury is very sad and very unfortunate. He had Tommy John surgery when the Mets first drafted him, when he was a shortstop, and they first converted him to a pitcher back in 2010, I think it was. He had Tommy John surgery. So I remember when all those guys came up, when deGrom, Wheeler, Matz, Harvey, and Syndergaard were all up. The only one who didn't have Tommy John surgery, because Harvey was going through Tommy John surgery at the time. The only one who didn't have Tommy John surgery was Syndergaard when they were in the minors. And Syndergaard ended up having Tommy John surgery a couple of years ago, and it basically ruined his career. Now he's got a 6 ERA with the Dodgers. But
did you see his quote, by the way? That was pretty sad.
It's really sad. I think it's terrible. Like, I wish we could have kept those five together for a long time, but I do quietly root for them to be good with their teams. And it sucks that that this is happening to deGrom. Steven Matz has been terrible ever since he joined the Cardinals. Syndergaard's been awful. Zach Wheeler's been tremendous, so I'm happy for him. It stinks that he's on the Phillies, but he has been great. But going back to deGrom, though, it's really unfortunate. He came up late. He came up when he was in his mid to late 20s. So he dominated for so many seasons. That 2018 and 2019 season, those two seasons were two of the best seasons anybody has ever seen a player pitch in the history of baseball. I mean, he was absolutely incredible, and it honestly just stinks. And we started to see it coming a little bit when he got hurt and missed the majority of the season a couple of years ago, and was up and down with injuries throughout last year as well. Started the season on the IL. It didn't come back until a couple months in the year. The injuries started to add up, and you knew that going into free agency. And the Rangers gave him a lot of money, and they took that risk. They knew Jacob deGrom, if he's completely healthy, is the best pitcher in the league. There's no doubt about that. But the thing is, if they have to keep him healthy, and they give him 6 years, he's pushing his mid-30s now, and he's going to miss all of the rest of this season and potentially all of next season. He may, best case scenario, probably returns like late summer next year. It usually sometimes takes up to a year and a half for some of these guys to come back, and especially at his old age, it might take even longer. So it definitely sucks to see. I would love to, even though I wanted him to stay a Met forever and be dominant with the Mets. It just sucks to see that, like, a guy with his talent to start to go down like that, and it starts to look like that this might be the common trend of the rest of his career, even when he comes back from Tommy John.
Yeah, and if you look at the games that he's played in, after that 2-year unreal stretch of 18 and 19, I have his baseball reference page pulled up right in front of me, like has often been the case. You look past that 2019 season, take 2020 with a grain of salt, because that was a weird shortened season. But from that year on, he made 15 starts in 2021, which was a damn shame, because I remember that season like it was yesterday. He was absolutely dominating, and if I remember correctly, the Mets were actually in first place. But as soon as you heard that he was going to be out for that season, the Mets' chances for the playoffs essentially went down the drain. And I remember his ERA was 1.08. And then he started 11 games last year, and this year just 6.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think that that's been like the big trend throughout his entire last couple of seasons. Like you were saying, back in 2021 too, when he got off to that ridiculously good start, but it ended up getting hurt halfway through the season, didn't come back. You know, that's been like the common trend the last couple of years, and I think the Mets did see that too in a way. And you know, they offered him a pretty good contract, but I don't think anybody in baseball was willing to give him as much as the Rangers were going to decide to give him.
Yeah, I would agree. But, and like I said, it's a real shame too, because in my honest opinion, the Texas Rangers are one of the best stories in baseball that really isn't talked about enough. I mean, let me give you a fun fact here about the Rangers. They are top 5 all 10 at around 60, or all time at around 60 games played this early in the season for run differential. As great as their pitching staff has been, even without DeGrom for the most part, we mentioned Nathan Eovaldi. John Gray has been a productive number 2 guy. Mm-hmm. Andrew Heaney's been another solid pickup. Remember when he stunk it up with the Yankees? Why couldn't we get that from him? Yeah. But then you have a lineup that consists of Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, who as of this recording has a 25-game hitting streak, Adolis Garcia, and he's becoming a star. And then you also have Jonah Heim in that lineup, to name a few. This is a team that's really putting a scare into the Houston Astros. Now, I honestly don't know if they'll have enough to overtake Houston for the division, but you got to be pretty worried about them going forward. And if you look at the offensive categories, 4 of the 5 players in there are Texas Rangers. The only one that isn't a Texas Ranger is Aaron Judge.
Yeah. No, it's definitely true. It's definitely true. And it'll be interesting to see if they keep it up, and if they're able to dethrone the Astros. I think they will keep it up, and I think they'll be a playoff team this year. The question is, though, if the Astros are going to get hot, you can always assume that the Astros will get hot at one point.
And I also love their manager, Bruce Bochy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's a part that's not talked about very much, that is a reason why they turned it around so quickly, too. I mean, you bring in Bruce Bochy, and he's just a trendsetter. You know, it's like the impact Buck Showalter had on the Mets last season. Like the first year you bring him in, they automatically become a dynamic team. It's same thing with the Bruce Bochy situation. I mean, he's a 3-time World Series champion. He is a tremendous manager, and obviously you got to be the front runner for manager of the year as of right now.
Front runner, I think he is the manager of the year. Nobody thought the Rangers would be this good.
It's true. Unless you want to throw Brandon Hyde in there, though.
I'm going to say maybe, because I did see the Orioles turn around a little bit, but I think given his reputation, I think it's going to be Bruce Bochy.
Probably.
But that guy's going in the Hall of Fame when it's all said and done, and he is truly a forever Giant. But before we end this show, there is one more basketball topic that we have to get to, and I'm kind of glad we saved this for last. So I'm hearing a little story that Kyrie Irving's trying to have LeBron take his talents down to the Lone Star State. I'm sorry. What?
Yeah, pretty wild. I mean, that was a report that I did not expect to hear when I heard that yesterday. Talked about it on the 3&D a little bit too. So weird, just strange. I mean, I don't think that the the entire idea has been shot down that LeBron is not interested in going to Dallas apparently, and Kyrie is very interested in going back to Dallas. Again, you can't believe a single rumor that has to do with Kyrie Irving. You can't believe anything. He's going to do whatever he wants to do. He'll tell you that he's going to sign a long-term deal with the Mavericks, and he'll go sign with the Pistons or something. This is what he does. It's what he does. So you cannot, take it as gospel when a report like this comes out. But I'm not surprised that he reached out to LeBron to try to team up with him. I mean, there was the rumors that he wanted to go to the Lakers. The Lakers don't really have any room to acquire him. They'd have to move around a lot of stuff in order to be able to bring him in, or you'd have to take a huge pay cut in order to go to the Lakers, which also doesn't seem likely. But it's interesting. He's always got to have somebody. I mean, he had his best bud, KD, with him in Brooklyn, and his crazy antics and stuff ended up costing the Nets a chance of actually winning something with those two. And they had to part their ways. So why if you're also the Mavericks too, this is the first time in LeBron's entire career where his trade value isn't tremendous. He's due to make $50 million this year. He's getting older. He's injury prone now, and a lot of teams aren't dying to have him on their team. If the Mavericks, it would be a very weird trio of Luka, Kyrie, and LeBron. 3 guys who have to have the ball in their hands to dominate the game. There's not enough basketball to go around for those 3. That's pretty much the bottom line. It is a crazy situation. Never thought it would actually happen, the Dallas thing, but it makes for at least an interesting topic for us to talk about.
Yeah, no, for sure. Oh my gosh, I'm just cringing at the thought of them playing on the same team under a certain Maverick billionaire. See what I did there with my choice of words?
Yep.
Mark Cuban, and I mean, he's fun to watch on the Shark Tank, but as like an owner, oh God. Wish that guy would just keep his mouth shut,
Yeah, it's true.
But I mean, hey, you tanked away a playoff spot when you probably could have made a run, and now you may get rewarded by having LeBron James. Yeah, excuse me if I don't sound enthusiastic about that whole idea.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I don't think Dallas is very enthusiastic by that idea that much either.
What is it, by the way, with all the mediocre teams in the city of Dallas getting all the attention, and yet the star teams like the Stars and the Rangers seem to fly under the radar?
Yeah, it's true.
But
great question. I know that was a dig at the Cowboys.
Oh yeah, you read between the, you know me all too well.
Yeah, that was the point of that comment, but no, it's all good.
Paul, you've known me pretty much longer than anybody at this network. You knew that was going to come out of my mouth at some point. Absolutely. But in any event, that's pretty much all we have for this episode of Game On. I think this was our Johan Santana episode, or I'm sorry, I should really say Chase Blackburn before he came back, number 57. And if you want to give us a follow on all of our social medias, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at ETB Podcast, at the ETB Podcast Network. And of course, please don't, you can follow us at Game On ETB for Empty the Bench. And please don't forget to hit that big red button down below give us a like, give us a comment, let us know your thoughts. We want to hear from you guys. And of course, if you want to check out other such as this man in the square right next to me, you can find his episodes 3 and D coming on. I believe it's at his recent one just dropped at 5:00, right?
It did. Episode 2 dropped at 5. Talked about all the Kyrie stuff, bunch of NBA Finals stuff. So if you guys are checking out this episode, definitely go check out the 3 and D episode 2. It was definitely a good one. We got more stuff coming up too throughout the weeks.
And of course, also make sure you check out our website. And I'm sure there will probably be some more blogs coming on. You just never know with the certain brains of certain writers out there on this website. And I hear you might be joining in the little blog party too. Is that correct, Paul?
Oh yeah, we got a little something in the works for sure.
But anyways, that'll wrap it up for episode of Game On. And Paul, great to talk to you as always.
Always a pleasure, Hank.
All right, and hopefully we will be back with Johnny on our next episode. But until next time, I'm Hank Indictor, and we will see you guys later.